Hello, my name is Sam Stageman.
And I'm Rochelle McDaniel. We're your average tea fanatics. We're going to be investigating the impacts of green tea on metabolism because we are very interested to see if all the claims on the internet that green tea is your new magic food to make you skinny are actually, if it actually has any truth to it.
And as you all know, you can trust everything that's on the internet.
Oh, of course, everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
So first off, where does tea come from? So tea in general, it's the leaves of the Camellia sinensis plant, so nothing too complicated there. But then how do we get different types? Well, that's based on how the tea is processed. Black tea is fully fermented oxidized leaves, and then oolong is semi-fermented. Green tea, on the other hand, it's not fermented. And then white tea is also non-fermented, but it's picked at a different time, so you get that different taste. So, fun fact, an herbal tea is actually technically not a true tea because it does not have the Camellia sinensis plant in it. It is called a tannid.
So what is in green tea? There's a number of polyphenolic compounds that are in green tea. There are more catechins in green tea than, say, black tea, and there's less theaflavins because catechins are reduced to theaflavins during fermentation, and if we remember, green tea is less fermented. It is actually non-fermented than black tea. So it also includes a number of flavanols, including quercetin, K-ampherol, myrocetin, and glycosides. A typical cup of green tea has 250 to 350 milligrams of tea solid. 30 to 42% of these are catechins, and these are what we will be focusing on as the compounds that affect metabolism and have anti-cancer effects. And also 3 to 6% of the tea solids are caffeine.
So then, what are polyphenolic compounds? So green tea has a number of polyphenolic compounds such as epigallocatechin 3 gallate, or EGCG. We're going to be referring to it in the acronyms because if we said the whole name, it would take the whole show. And EGCG is the most common polyphenolic compound in green tea. There's also epigallocatechin, or EGC, epicatechin 3 gallate, ECG, or epicatechin, EC. So polyphenols are compounds with phenolic features. In plants, most of the compound is attached to sugar and is in the form of glycosides. The classification of the polyphenols are based on the number of phenolic rings they have. And what's neat about the polyphenolic compounds is that they're the most abundant natural antioxidant in our diet. So as we mentioned earlier, EGCG is the most potent, and most of green tea's anti-carcinogenic effects are attributed to it. So it's a pretty powerful player in this whole conglomeration of everything. So if we look to the left, we will see the kind of components of the green tea extract. A bit is caffeine, but most of it are the polyphenols. If we look more inwards, there's the catechin, and then, as we mentioned earlier, EGCG is the most common, so it has the largest circle. And then on the other side, if you're really interested, we have all the different structures of those different polyphenolic compounds. All right.
So what are catechins? Catechins are a subgroup of the polyphenolic group, as we saw earlier. They are also photochemical compounds that are found in most plants. They are flavanol monomers. 10 to 20% of catechins in green tea are epigallocatechin and EGCG. An ingestion of catechins have numerous activities, including antioxidant effects, antiviral, anti-plaque forming, anti-cancer, and reduces blood pressure and sugar. We will be talking a lot about antioxidant effects, anti-cancer, and reducing blood sugar.
Then over here is another little fancy structure of the catechin. It's pretty similar to the polyphenols if you see all the different rings and all that. So then, what's fat? Well, because we're going to be talking about metabolism, we need to discuss what fat is. So most of the time people say, oh, you shouldn't eat so much fat and all that. It's like, you can't completely cut fat out of your diet because it's important. Fatty acids store energy and nutrients. They provide protection. They insulate the body so you keep nice and warm. They start chemical reactions, and they act as messengers. So humans, we mostly eat triglyceride fats. And these are preferred for energy storage because they have 2 times more energy than proteins and carbohydrates. So when you need energy, first it's the carbohydrates that go, and then the fats. So that's why you need it. Um, and then when extra energy is needed, lipases are used to break down these triglycerides. And then we also need cholesterol to help provide structure for cell membranes. So that doesn't mean you can't stop eating your Cheerios. You should still keep an eye out on your cholesterol. The deal is, though, you just want to have a low number of low density lipids versus, and you want more high density lipids because the cholesterol helps provide structure for your cell membranes. All right, so and then we look over here, we have some examples of fatty acid structures. So they all kind of have the same backbone, the glycerol, but then it branches off into three different types. For the stearate, that's a saturated fatty acid because it has the maximum number of hydrogen bonds that it can have. So then with oleate, that's a monounsaturated, that means it has a double bond. So the mono was one, and then unsaturated means like a double or triple bond. And then we look at the linoleate, it's a polyunsaturated. So based on that, we can assume that there's either two or more. In this case, there are two double bonds. And so that's why it's a polyunsaturated fat.
So excess fat in green tea. Fat that is not used as energy is stored as energy for future use in adipocytes. The size of adipocytes fluctuates based on how much fat is present. This is important to note because you don't increase the number of adipocytes you have when you gain weight, you increase the size of each adipocyte because it gains more fat essentially. So adipocytes increasing in size causes weight gain, and adipocytes decreasing in size causes weight loss. So in order to lose weight, though, you need to both burn all of your carbohydrates, because that's your first energy storage that your body's going to use, and then your adipocytes you can burn those. Fat in reserve must be used in order to lose weight. Green tea can reduce triglycerol and total cholesterol concentrations. It also inhibits hepatic and body fat accumulation, which I will talk about later via some research articles. And green tea can also increase fat oxidation, which is required for weight loss.
So, what might happen if you have excess fat? Well, over here we have an example of Weird Al from his fat video. As you see, he has quite a corpulent body because that's the excess fat. It means his adipocytes are quite large. And then on the other one, getting fat might be because of eating too much, which this dog wishes to do. And fat sounds awesome. Let's get fat.
So how do catechins in green tea affect metabolism? There are two main ways in which catechins in green tea affect metabolism that we are going to talk about based on the findings of current research. So in many studies that we looked at, green tea consumers were shown to have more weight loss and lower BMIs than the control. Of course, you both had exercise and healthy diet. So green tea is not just a magic pill that you could take and you're suddenly have no need to exercise. So catechins have been shown to increase the metabolism by 4%. And how have they been shown to do that? Catechins have been shown to play a role in reducing oxidized fats that lead to obesity, clogged arteries, and cardiovascular diseases. So by reducing the oxidized fats, they are essentially prohibiting obesity, clogged arteries, and cardiovascular diseases to a certain extent. Catechins also play a role in preventing insulin spikes, thus lowering fat absorption via glucose movement into adipose cells. Right, so the first research article we're going to talk about is the catechins' effects on the metabolism by reducing oxidized fats. So this article focused on malondialdehyde modified low-density lipoproteins as the oxidized fat that needs to be reduced. It is also an independent factor and not related to cholesterol LDL, as we talked about earlier. So the study essentially showed that long-term consumption of catechins inhibits the formation of oxidized lipids, namely MDA-LDL. It does this by redox reactions and in reducing the oxidized fats. So this is how catechins got the name antioxidant and why they have antioxidant effects. So oxidized lipids are linked to obesity and arteriosclerosis, which leads to cardiovascular disease. So by reducing these lipids, catechins can essentially help prevent obesity, arteriosclerosis, and cardiovascular disease. Further studies could clarify the relationship of reducing catechins to a body fat reducing mechanism, but so far this is pretty solid research. So before I talk about the next research article, which talks about the effects of catechins on insulin spikes, I need to do a quick background slide on the insulin effects on adipocytes. So essentially, the secretion of insulin is triggered by high glucose levels in the blood. How does it do that? Essentially, glucose is moved into pancreatic beta cells and undergoes glycolysis and other metabolization processes that we talked about earlier, and it results in the formation of ATP. So once ATP is formed, ATP blocks ATP-sensitive potassium channels, which depolarizes the beta cells, and then depolarization results in an influx of calcium 2 plus increase, which triggers the release of insulin into the blood. So after insulin has been released into the blood, insulin then triggers the uptake of glucose into adipocytes and converts it into lipids, which increases the size of the adipocyte. And in addition to uptaking glucose and turning it into lipid, insulin also inhibits lipolysis, or the breakdown of lipids within adipocytes. So it kind of increases the size of adipocytes in two different ways there. So the second method that we will talk about in how catechin affects the metabolism is by inhibiting the insulin secretion from pancreatic beta cells. This research article showed that the EGCG catechin had significant inhibitory effects on the glucose-stimulated insulin secretion. EGC and EGC had similar effects but less significant, and the epicatechin or catechin had no effect. So the EGCG inhibited insulin secretion by inhibiting the oscillation of the intracellular calcium influx into the cell, which, if you remember from the previous slide, the influx of calcium due to the depolarization of the cells will trigger the secretion of insulin. So when the ATP-sensitive potassium channel blocker tolbutamide is activated by ATP, it will depolarize the cell, but the EGCG will inhibit the influx of calcium coming into the cell, so essentially insulin will not be triggered into the blood.
All right, so does this mean that green tea is a wonder food? It can help with your metabolism, but you're not going to lose a whole lot of weight by just drinking it. So tea plus cheeseburger does not equal bodybuilder.
So before the end of this presentation, I would just like to talk a little bit about how catechins have been noted to have anti-cancer effects. Rod Dashwood at Oregon State University just in 1999 took a look at cancer chemoprotective mechanisms of green tea, specifically the EGCG catechin, against heterocyclic amine mutagens from cooked meat. So essentially, cooked meat and fish produce heterocyclic amine mutagens that are known to induce colon tumors in many animals. Specifically, N-hydroxylated heterocyclic amines were inhibited by complete tea beverage and by individual tea component, EGCG, in aberrant crypt foci in rats, which the ACF is known pre-neoplastic lesions that can lead to tumors. So the study found that catechins can inhibit the enzymes that contribute to the metabolic activation of these heterocyclic amines, mainly microsomal NADPH, cytochrome P450 reductase, and N-O-acetyltransferase. So this suggests that green and black tea have many mechanisms in inhibiting the formation of the ACF, and more research could be done to further prove these studies.
So, quick little summary. Green tea is non-fermented leaves of Camellia sinensis, and it contains polyphenolic compounds and catechins which help promote and increase metabolism. And the most potent of these compounds is EGCG. So we get fat buildup when we have excess fat that is stored for future use, and then it's used up for weight loss. And the key to having a healthy weight loss is moderation. So green tea doesn't make fat disappear just like that. You actually have to work for it. it's going.
No, not this slide. All right, and then a summary of the research that we presented is that there are many findings that catechins have different effects on the metabolism. Catechins, mainly the EGCG, have many effects on metabolism, including reducing oxidized fats through redox reactions that can lead to obesity, clogged arteries, and cardiovascular diseases. So by reducing the oxidized fats, they can prevent obesity, clogged arteries, and cardiovascular diseases. Catechins also prevent insulin secretion spikes when blood glucose is high, thus lowering fat absorption by insulin and decreasing the amount of fat that you can put on. Besides boosting the metabolism, EGCG can possibly prevent cancer. It prevents the formation of aberrant crypt foci in rats by inhibiting the formation of hen-hydroxylated heterocyclic amines by inhibiting the enzymes that are necessary for the activation of these heterocyclic amines.
All right, so if you take one thing away from this, green tea is not a cure-all. Sorry, there's no such thing as magic.
No, I wish there was.
Yeah, it's kind of a wah, wah moment.
But even so, green tea's got a lot of health benefits, and I still drink a cup every day.
Definitely.
And loved doing the research for this project.
Oh, yeah. So drink away, my friends.
But don't expect to be a bodybuilder.
All right, here are our resources, and thank you. My final words, stay thirsty, my friends.